One of the most polarizing names in the 2024 NFL quarterback class is Spencer Rattler. Currently, Rattler is sort of in that second or third tier of quarterbacks for this year. You have your main six, who are supposed to go in the first and second round, then you have guys like Michael Pratt, and then you have Spencer Rattler. He's supposed to be in that day 2 or day 3 range, and he's someone who has a significant amount of upside, but there are also a lot of question marks about him. As everyone knows, Rattler was the number 1 quarterback in his high school class, was an early Heisman contender at Oklahoma, and then transferred to South Carolina, where he had an up and down 2 seasons. There is a lot to be said about Spencer Rattler, and in today's video, we're going to try to explain his NFL draft profile. We're going to talk about how he got to this point, how he became that coveted 5-star prospect, what happened at Oklahoma, what happened at South Carolina, and where he should be headed next. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football or the NFL draft, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I could cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the harsh truth about Spencer Rattler in the NFL. In order to understand how Rattler got to this point, we first need to go back in time. Rattler was born of the oldest of 2 kids in Phoenix, Arizona, and he was born in the year 2000. His father would help him develop a love and enjoyment for the game of football, and that would happen at a very young age. By the time Spencer had made it to Pinnacle High School in Phoenix, he was already both physically and technically sound enough to start on varsity. Keep in mind, he was only 14 years old. He was incredibly talented as soon as he stepped on the football field, and he immediately started to gather plenty of hype. His freshman year at Pinnacle in 2015, he threw for 2,300 yards and 19 touchdowns with 9 interceptions. He looked so incredibly good that he was getting Power 5 scholarship offers as a freshman. Schools like UCLA, Arizona State, and Texas A&M all reached out, wanting to hopefully land his talents at some point. The next year in 2016, Spencer would throw for nearly 3,000 yards and 23 touchdowns and 10 picks. This only added to the hype that he had, and before his junior season, he started to get more and more interest from college scouts, namely from the coaching staff at Oklahoma, who offered him the summer before his sophomore year. He'd later decide to commit to Oklahoma in 2017 before the season would even start. He ended up dominating his junior campaign, throwing for almost 4,000 yards and 45 touchdowns. After his junior season, he was invited to the Elite 11 competition and played alongside players such as Jaden Daniels, Max Duggan, Sam Howell, Talia Tagovailoa, and Bo Nix. He absolutely dominated the competition and was named the Elite 11 MVP. While he was a senior in high school in 2018, he was featured on the popular high school football show QB Beyond the Lights. Most viewers on the show thought he came off as cocky, stuck up, and a real jerk to his teammates, and years later, he would comment on the show saying, quote, "My character is definitely not portrayed well in that show. That's just how it was made. I am 5 or 6 years grown from that, and hopefully I have changed a little bit. I definitely think I have." He was set to be the standout quarterback for Pinnacle his senior year, but would only end up playing in 7 games due to him being ruled ineligible for violating school code. He wasn't suspended from school or anything, and Lincoln Riley said it didn't have to do with drugs or how he was getting into college or anything. Nothing really came from it, and his dad said, quote, "It's a dumb thing and it happened. He's a good kid and he's never in trouble and has a 3.8 GPA. He still played in the high school All-American game and signed on to play at OU. Before he was suspended though, he managed to break the all-time Arizona State high school record, as on his 18th birthday, he finished with a career of 11,000 yards, 116 touchdowns, and 33 interceptions. He was rated as a 5-star recruit in the class of 2019, the number 1 pro-style quarterback in the country, and the best recruit in the state of Arizona. Some were saying he might have been the greatest quarterback to ever come out of the state, in front of guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick, Brett Hundley, and Danny White. The hype for Spencer coming into OU was insane, and given his great high school career, some thought he would start as a true freshman, but that would not end up being the case. When he arrived at Oklahoma in 2019, he was the backup behind Alabama transfer Jalen Hurts. He only came into play at specific moments, like the end of the college football playoff game against LSU, as he threw 11 passes for 81 yards and a touchdown. But 2020 was the year he was supposed to take over, and he'd end up being named the starter, and he had a ton of hype. His first start came in a blowout loss to Missouri State, but the first signs of trouble would come at home against Kansas State the next week. They would lose that game, and then after that, he threw 2 picks and a loss to Iowa State, and the Sooners lost again. Luckily, he'd be able to shake it off though, as he helped beat Texas in a crazy 4 overtime game and eventually helped OU win the Big 12 championship. He ended up finishing with 3,000 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. He entered his redshirt sophomore season as the listed starter again, but showed more issues and continued to struggle. It seemed like he was just not grasping the offense or was just not making the plays and executing the way that Lincoln Riley wanted him to. In one particular game against West Virginia, he struggled so much that the OU student section started chanting for Caleb Williams to play. I remember that game, it was a night game, and that was a big moment. This would prove to be the beginning of the end for Spencer, as he really struggled against Texas, and Caleb Williams came in and saved the day in that game. The same thing happened in the Kansas matchup, and eventually the noise got so loud that Spencer Rattler was going to be benched. There was even that time where student reporters were up in some sort of tower watching practice, and eventually they decided to roll with Caleb Williams. There were some that were saying that Spencer was a locker room cancer, and then he was eventually benched for good and finished the season with 1,400 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 5 picks, and it became Caleb's team. After the season was over, Lincoln Riley would leave for USC, and he also did leave for USC, except it was South Carolina instead of Southern Cal. He decided he would follow his tight end Austin Stogner there, and he got to a new SEC program in a new part of the country, and he could sort of start over with a little bit less pressure on him. Upon arriving at South Carolina, he was instantly named the starting quarterback for the 2022 season and was happy to get away from OU. He said, quote, "A lot of guys don't get another chance or to start over where they really want to. I was happy to get away from a toxic situation and get somewhere new." While Spencer did play better with the Gamecocks, it still was somewhat difficult for him to entirely mesh with the pro-style offense. He was used to something very different at OU, and in 2022, he finished with 3,000 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, and 12 picks. The Gamecocks ended up going 8-5, and he had those monster victories over both Tennessee and Clemson. Shane Beamer was extremely excited for Spencer to get to work for the following season because it finally felt like it was Spencer's team and he was going to be able to put it all together. He really started to mesh, and he had two big-time receivers in both Antoine Wells and Xavier Legette to throw the ball to. Coach Beamer said, quote, "Last year he came in at this time and he really wasn't trying to impose his will and force his leadership on you. He was trying to earn their respect and earn a role and go from there, and now everybody knows what he can do and what he's done. It's very clearly his team and it's very clearly his offense." How would he end up doing? Well, he finished his senior season with 3,186 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 picks. Sadly, the Gamecocks did worse in SEC play than they did the previous year, as they only ended up going 5-7, and they were not able to beat Clemson in that final game to get to bowl eligibility. He still earned his spot in South Carolina history, as he finished 5th in career passing yards, and then is now declared for the NFL draft. I'm not even sure if he really has any eligibility remaining, but yeah, he did declare. In terms of his NFL fit, what do I think is going to happen? While he has lost prestige due to leaving Oklahoma and concerns about his personality, he's still projected to be drafted in this year's draft, and while that projection is all over the place, he was invited to the Senior Bowl and was actually given their MVP award. He did reportedly struggle in some of their drills, and he also didn't really perform that well at the Combine. He ran a 4.95 40-yard dash time, and his interviewing skills were just deemed okay. But things seem very weird, as there were also some teams that reportedly rated him as a second-round pick on their draft boards, and no one really knows. In terms of more technical stuff, he does make a lot of mistakes in reading coverages, and sometimes focuses way too much on his primary receiver. This was an issue at both Oklahoma and South Carolina, and while his arm got him ranked as a 5-star, it didn't get that much better while he was in college, and it doesn't really feel like a playmaking arm at this point. Spencer unfortunately tends to panic a lot, which happened at OU all the time, and you'd only get marginally better at South Carolina. Honestly, that is a pretty big problem, and right now he seems to be clearly outside of that top 6, as Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix are all in that top group, and I'd also say Michael Pratt has probably passed him at this point. I'd have Rattler as my number 8 quarterback on the board, but it doesn't mean he has no future. He still has that 5-star arm, was productive, and seemingly mentally he has gotten a lot better. Still though, I think it's fair to think of him as a solid backup, who will probably make a couple starts when an injury happens or a team's playing really bad. I don't think he'll be an NFL starter anytime soon, but he can come in and make plays in relief, and my comparison for him is someone like Taylor Heineke or Case Keenum. You never really know though, as there are a couple of NFL franchises who have their guys, but they're getting older. An example that came to mind for me was the Los Angeles Rams, as Matthew Stafford's getting old, and maybe you take a chance on a guy like Spencer, put him on the bench, see if he can learn and pan out to that hype. I don't really know though, but that's honestly the best situation I think for him. Go to a team with an older quarterback, see if he can develop, and see what happens. Overall, when Spencer Rattler was the number 1 quarterback coming out of high school, the ultimate goal was to get to the NFL. That is definitely going to happen. He's going to get drafted, and by that standard, you can say he lived up to the hype. He also started nearly 4 years, so to say he's a complete bust is going a little bit too far, but I also will say he was decently underwhelming and did not live up to being the number 1 quarterback in his class. Still though, he's going to get a chance to make it in the NFL, and we'll see what team takes a chance on him. But what do you guys think? What do you think of Spencer Rattler? Where do you think he'll go in the NFL? And what quarterback prospect should I take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.